Hi, this is Eric, and I'm here with episode 13 of Survival Medicine, and we will talk about medication shelf life. The topic for this one came from a email that Mike sent to me, and he had two questions. One was regarding vet meds. Can you use pet medicines in the same way that you would use human medicines if it's the same compound? So that's question number one. And the second question was long-term storage of tablets or dry capsules, and would putting them in a cool, dark, dry place with oxygen absorbers help, and what would be some shelf life to expect out of that? So anyways, I thought this was two great questions, and led me to some digging and some additional information. I called a friend of mine who is a pharmacist and did some research off of the internet. And here's what I came up with. Number one, let's tackle the vet meds. Well, there's some legal issues with this. You can only use medicines with the person and intended use for which it's prescribed. So if you choose to use a pet medicine for yourself or for family members, there may be some legal issues. Now, obviously, if you're in a disaster situation, there's no other options. I personally would use them, and the pharmacists I talk to would have no problem using them, because these are basically made by the same companies that make the human medicines, and it's the exact same compound. The packaging may be a little bit different, but there's some things that you need to know. The quality control, although I don't have any data specifically on this was something brought up by the pharmacist, that perhaps there may not be the same quality control, so you may have a little bit more contaminants in the tablets, which may make an allergic response slightly higher. This is, again, theoretical. I don't have any data to support that. That was strictly a thought from the pharmacist. Another key thing is you got to know what the dosing is and how to dose the medicine. You have to be very careful about the medicine. And so you have to have some degree of proper knowledge. Now here's an example of a forum that was posted on some survival forum somewhere. And I have something underlined in red here, and it says ketoconazole and metronidazole are both antifungals. Well, that's not true. The ketoconazole is an antifungal, but the metronidazole is not. That is an antibiotic. And so this is put up here just to highlight you really need to know what you're doing. You can't just pop a bunch of pills. You can get yourself very sick. And in fact, the one flagell right there, the metronidazole, if you look back in some of the videos on diarrhea that I posted, this is one that you can use to treat different types of diarrhea. And if you take metronidazole and drink alcohol, you can get a very severe, life-threatening reaction. So if you're going to be stepping out on a limb and take some medicines, you probably need to know a little bit about what you're doing. Go to Barnes & Noble or whatever bookstore is around, and perhaps get one of those nursing drug books. I think that would be a great resource just to have on your shelf. But anyways, this slide is here just to point out you have to know a little bit more than just some random facts or something that a friend told you that maybe this pill would work or that pill would work. If you're going to sort of tackle this beast, spend some time learning. All right, let's go to the second thing about shelf life and storage of medicines. Well, expiration dates were required by law in 1979, and the purpose of this is that it would guarantee full potency and full safety of the drug. But if you've looked at a prescription that you've ever had, you know the expiration dates can be fairly short, 1 year, perhaps 2 years, less on liquid substances. And there is some concern. There was a report in JAMA in 1963, and this was contested, and some people think that perhaps this is not accurate, but you need to know about it and at least be aware of this, that there was an alleged expired tetracycline dose that led to some kidney damage, some renal tubular damage. So there are concerns that there may be some medicines that used outside of an expiration date can be problematic. But I think that's probably very few and far between. And again, this is a very old report, and several people have called into question its findings. Well, the military spends a lot of money on medicines to support the troops, and they were finding out that they were spending millions and millions of dollars replacing expired medicines. So they got together and performed what was called the Shelf Life Extension Plan study. They looked at 213 drugs. They found you could have an additional 107 months. It's about 9 years added on to most of the drugs that they tested. So that tells you right there, the military obviously is storing these medicines in a way that's perhaps different than what you're doing, so you may need to change how you would keep your medicines. But this clearly shows that the shelf life of medicines extends well beyond what's printed on the label. Looking through some stuff with MedScape, they quoted a military study, and they're probably referring to the same one, the Shelf Life Extension Plan. And in this particular article that was written by a physician, he quoted that over 90% of the drugs were safe and effective after 15 years of storage. There's another article that gets quoted quite a bit. It's the Wall Street Journal by Lori Cohen. This was published in 2000. And she made an accusation that perhaps the expiration dates are more for financial reasons rather than factual reasons. And she seems to think that if you have to buy medicines constantly, that's more money for the drug companies. And if you knew that they could sit on your shelf for a long time and last, then they wouldn't make as much money. Again, that's the author's conjecture regarding this. But as we're looking at the information from the military, which is very sound, very solid data, clearly most medicines can extend beyond what's their printed expiration date. There's a couple exceptions that the military did note. One were water purification tablets. Again, that's a very key item. It's something that you have to replace because these do lose their effectiveness rather rapidly. They won't make you sick if you use them, but they just won't work, so they won't purify the water. The other is the methylquine, which is a malaria drug. It's something that fortunately we don't have to deal with too much here in the United States, but if you're going overseas, malaria is rampant worldwide, and this may have some importance to you later. So how would you store medicines? The military, as well as several other sources that I found, states that they should be cool, dry, dark, and the pharmacist I talked to said putting oxygen absorbers was probably helpful because sort of the oxygenation of the compounds is one way that they degrade. So if you put some of these medicines, for example, in a Mylar bag with some oxygen absorbers and vacuum sealed it, that perhaps is a very good way to put these medicines away safely for a long period of time. Now this picture on the slide here is to remind you that putting them in your medicine cabinet in your bathroom that's probably hot and humid is the worst place to put your medicines if you want to keep them for a long period of time. Now one final note, again digging around the internet and on YouTube to find out what else was published. I only found one other video that was put out. It was by the Patriot Nurse. I'll put a link on this one. And she had a posting entitled The True Shelf Life of Drugs, which I think she also did some research and had some reasonable things to say. I've looked at several of her videos since then, and I think she's got very good information. There's a few minor errors, but none of them have any impact, and I would highly encourage you to watch what she puts out. She's got some very good practical information. Anyways, to summarize, there's legal issues with using medicines that are not prescribed to you, but in a disaster situation with no other reasonable alternatives, I think the vet meds, as long as you know what you're doing, what the dose is, the side effects, and actual uses for the medication, I think is a reasonable thought. I personally would not have a problem taking vet meds. And then the second piece is on the shelf life. The military says that there's a much longer shelf life than what's published on the packages of these meds, perhaps somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 years, but they need to be stored in a way that promotes that sort of long-term viability. And again, doing that is cool, dry, dark, and oxygen absorbers are probably a very good idea, although I didn't see any data on that specifically. Anyways, I want to thank Mike for sending that question. It was a great experience for me to kind of run through and dig and get some more information, and I hope this helps. And thank you guys very much for watching, and I appreciate all the support.